Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do love hearing from you, so keep those comments rolling in. I especially love to know where you're from, whether it's Florida or Texas. Whereabouts in the world are you from? Are you from Australia? Let me know. And don't forget to get that quintessential drink, because I really have a fabulous story for you tonight, so you're going to need something refreshing. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my dreams lay shattered, splintered, fractured around me, scattered precariously like the glass fragments from a broken mirror into hundreds of tiny smithereens. I knew that I would never be the same ever again, as my devastating skiing accident had caused me to go flying into a tree at a grueling, harrowing high impact that would almost certainly cause catastrophic damage to my right leg that could never be corrected or righted again. I would perpetually have to live with this unfortunate encumbrance all of my life, walking around with a limp, being subjected to bouts of unreasonable shooting pain that would make me invariably grit my teeth from the agony. In truth, it was a complete miracle I was actually alive. I had hit the tree with such a powerful brute force. I had to be grateful for small mercies, however obscure or faint they actually may be. I can remember drifting in and out of consciousness after the horrifying ordeal. I also recall feeling a strange kind of suction, followed by a popping, rather like a cork being pulled out of a bottle of champagne, after which I found myself hovering above my body, looking down at a crumbled, distorted form that lay underneath the tree. I discovered to my immense surprise that this bedraggled, crumpled bundle was actually me. I felt strangely disconnected, indifferent, and rather detached from my own physical body. I could hear the frenzied, terrified cries of people shouting, "Oh my God! We're losing him! Do something! We're losing him!" I do not remember anything else after that, until one day I woke up in my hospital bed, connected to all kinds of tubes. I was informed that my now withered leg was a physical disability or impediment in my life that would require a significant amount of pain management. Indeed, amputation had been on the cards, a viable option that had been seriously contemplated. Ostensibly, my surgeon had decided against it, and that my leg should be spared. It was well worth saving, he thought. On occasion I would regret that decision, as the pain that I was to experience in the years that followed was sometimes quite unbearable, unrelenting, and vicious. But I had learnt to live with it, rather like a surfer moving with the waves on his surfboard, going with the flow of the ocean. I was to wake up in a hospital bed, heavily bandaged, with plasters on every available appendage, from the plethora of brutal breaks I'd sustained. I felt so disorientated and confused at first, I didn't actually know where I was, as solicitous nurses and doctors hovered around me like buzzing bees over a hive. "How are we today, Griffin? It's Griffin Holmes, am I right?" came a deep, gravelly voice. "I'm Dr. Wallace Fortescue." "I'm Griffin Holmes, that's right, Doctor. I suppose I'm doing all right, but I am experiencing a lot of shooting pain, uncomfortable spasms, especially in my right leg here." "Well, that is to be expected, Mr. Holmes, but we manage it with pain medications for you, and anti-inflammatories. You're a very lucky man indeed to be alive. For a moment it was touch and go there. We almost lost you a handful of times, I regret to say. In truth, we didn't think you would make it, but it seems you're a fighting man in more ways than one. The rare kind that always gives us hope here at the hospital. By all accounts, I'm very glad to say that you didn't sever your spine. Things could have panned out a lot worse for you. A whole lot worse. But I am going to make a full recovery, am I not, Doc? I'm going to be able to continue my job as a firefighter, am I not? Not in a physical capacity, no. I'm afraid not, Mr. Holmes. Please call me Griffin, Doctor." "Griffin," said the doctor, clearing his throat awkwardly. "As I was saying, your right leg is seriously impaired. I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings, but I need to be perfectly straight with you. That is the way I always am with my patients. The long-term prognosis for you is very bleak in regards to your leg. Your leg was badly shattered, Never seen anything like it in my life. It was almost unsalvageable. It certainly will disqualify you from active duty in the fire brigade." At this horrifying revelation, my heart sank like a heavy stone, sinking, plummeting, diving to the bottom of a lake, along with all my hopes and dreams. "But Doc, you don't understand. Firefighting is my life. It's all I've ever wanted to do since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I'm an active man, always loved sports, outdoor adventures. Are you saying it's all over for me, Doc? Because if you are, you might as well be signing my death certificate right now." "I know it sounds grim, Griffin. I admit that some of your outdoor activities you once pursued, like skiing, are things of the past. But that does not mean you cannot go out into nature, enjoy the natural world. But there are some things you're not going to be able to do anymore, with the ardent passion you previously pursued them, like skiing, running, long-distance hiking, cycling, and stuff like that. But there's no reason why you can't go hunting." "I'm afraid, Doctor, you're listing all the things I love best in the world. In other words, you're telling me that my life has to become much more sedentary from now on." "In a manner of speaking, yes, but your life is most certainly not over. There's so much to live for. You can pursue other interests. I've had patients wearing your shoes going on to achieve great things in their life. One man has become a fine potter. His work sells for considerable sums of money all over North America. Another has become a very successful aspiring chef. Perhaps life is drawing you down a different path. It's my belief, Griffin, from working with so many patients over the years, that nothing is ever random. Well, not as random as we may think. You may be surprised to learn that good can come out of bad, like the green grass shooting through the burnt carnage of a wildfire." "If you think that's going to cheer me up, Doctor, forget it. The last thing I can envisage for my life is becoming a potter, or a cook for that matter. I've never been good with my hands. Good grief, I couldn't think of anything I would despise more. As for my cooking skills, I've been told that my eggs taste just like bullets." The doctor chuckled. "Well, the good news there is, Griffin, if your eggs are like bullets, there's room for improvement." If the doctor's startling revelations were not a big enough blow for me, that day was to get progressively worse, a whole lot worse if that was at all possible. When my fiancé, Anwar Montinaro, came to visit me in hospital later on in the day, she too delivered me a great big punch in the guts. Talk about kicking a man when he's down. Was I not hurting enough in every part of my body? I knew something was up the moment Anwar entered my ward. Even the way she moved was stiff. Worse still, she was refusing to make any eye contact with me, avoiding my gaze very deliberately, like someone carrying the weight of a very guilty conscience on their shoulders, who would rather be anywhere else in the world than in the hospital ward with me. That was very clear to me. I knew she was going to unleash a bombshell that would potentially explode in my face like a landmine. I just knew it. I could feel it. The atmosphere in my hospital ward had become cold, unfriendly, clinical even. I waited with bated breath to hear what she was going to say, as if waiting for that nasty strike from a king cobra. Anwar twiddled her fingers awkwardly, playing with her long, perfectly manicured bright pink nails that were covered with a plethora of glittery designs. She studied them as though they were a great source of fascination for her, a premeditated excuse not to have to face me head-on. I watched her as she dragged her chair across the floor towards my bed, never once looking at me. But when I reached out to hold her hand in mine, she pushed it away. "Griffin, we need to talk. Now, you know I'd never wish what happened to you on anyone. I really, really wouldn't. But we've got to get real here. I mean, your accident on the ski slopes, it's changed everything for us. I don't know how to say this to you, but I just don't think we should get married anymore. It wouldn't work out in the circumstances," she said, pulling off her engagement ring, placing it on my bedside table. This revelation hit me like a sledgehammer. "I see," I said, my voice growing hoarse, my whole body now weighted down by a huge heaviness. "Why not?" Well, it's not practical, is it? Let's face it. Not anymore. I mean, not with that gammy leg of yours. I'm an active person. Your condition would be a hindrance to our relationship. We couldn't do those outdoor activities together that we were planning to do. We can't climb mountains together. Stuff like that. It's a real bummer, I know, for you, but it's equally so for me. If not more so in the circumstances. I see. So my crippled leg is a very big obstacle to our relationship, I said sarcastically, digging the knife in as hard as I possibly could. After all, you couldn't be seen marrying a cripple. Now, don't be so reactive, Griffin. I'm saying it as it is. I'd only start to resent you if we couldn't do the things together we used to do. And you know I would. I wouldn't want that to happen. You need a woman who can take care of you in your present condition. A woman who's sedentary, willing to look after you. Oh, I see. So I need a nurse, do I? That's not what I'm saying. Get out, I shouted. Get out. I don't need to hear any of this. You make me sick to the stomach. Get out. Now there's no need to be like that, Griffin. You're being exceedingly unreasonable. I said, get out. Did you hear me? Get out. The nurse, who'd been in the ward, taking down some brief notes, heard our conversation. She immediately flew to my defence, like a buzzard guarding a carcass from other predators. She pounced on my fiancé with a feisty, steely grit, her eyes like treacherous blue daggers. You heard the man! Get out! Get out! Did you hear? Get out! My fiancé's olive-skinned face grew as white as a sheet. The colour drained. She gave me a hostile look, stamped her foot like a petulant schoolkid, and then marched out of the hospital belligerently, in a huff, as if she was the one that had been hard done by. I never ever saw her again, although I was to learn that her name Anwar means liar, which in the circumstances is exceedingly apt. The nurse scurried towards me, her eyes brimming with tears. She reached out to hold my hand as she pulled a chair up to my bedside, and a lone silvery tear trickled down her cheek. She squeezed my hand tightly, reassuringly, looking into my eyes with a tender gentleness so lacking in my cold-blooded fiancé. "Are you all right?" she asked. I nodded. "What a horrible woman! You must forgive me for eavesdropping, but I overheard your conversation. I couldn't help it. Frankly, I'm so disgusted, repulsed, appalled even. How dare she talk to you like that? She was your fiancé, I take it. She ends your relationship after your dreadful skiing accident. I mean, how low can you get? Talk about kicking you in the guts." "Well, she doesn't want to spend her life with a cripple, does she? I suppose I can't blame her. It would seem being married to me would seriously compromise her future happiness." "That's ridiculous. She's ridiculous. But maybe she's done you a favour in the long term." "How's that?" "Well, she's shown you the grievous state of her heart, hasn't she? How selfish, self-centred and narcissistic she is. You can see her life only revolves around herself. Stuff anybody else. If she really loved you, she would marry you, even if you were completely paralysed from the waist down. Unconditional love has no barricades, no conditions, nor fixed terms. It just is. Your fiancé, well, she doesn't even have a heart. She's spineless. She's a snake in the grass." "I think you might be right there," I said. "Maybe I did dodge a bullet." "Oh, believe me, Mr. Hughes, you most certainly did," she said, giving me an encouraging nudge. "She might come in a pretty glitzy package that appears enticing and alluring, but believe me, the chocolate in the cellophane is seriously mouldy, hideously repugnant, completely inedible." Indeed, it was true. After my accident, I saw my fiancé, or ex-fiancé if you like, in a whole different light, as if seeing her for the very first time in a crowded room, in a blinding, sententious light that was so intense I could pick up all her flaws, rather reminding me of those scary UV photographs you get that show you the true hideous state of your skin, so that every bit of evidential sun damage is discernible to you. It was like I was seeing her through another very illuminating lens, rather like the eyes of God, that can see our hearts. This time I did not see the attractive woman with the long dark hair, fair skin and green eyes, for the veneer had been shoved to the side so forcefully, rather like the drapes on a window, and I got to see what was really on the inside. Needless to say, After an arduous year of intensive physical therapy, shooting physical pain, trauma counselling, along with a significant amount of checkups, I finally received a clean bill of health from my doctor. But returning to my former life as a firefighter was never going to happen. That part had been forever expunged from me. I felt a significant amount of bitterness in my life, possibly towards my ex-fiancé among other things, along with the unfortunate blows that the universe had dealt for me. So I punnelled all my energy into my father's business. Before he retired, he handed over the reins of the company to me, so I became the big boss, calling all the shots. The business in Los Angeles prospered, bearing an abundance of fruit, but I was very different, like an old dying tree. I'd lost the ardent passion and zealousness for life. Happiness eluded me, like a balloon on a string, floating into the azure blue sky. The string too far to reach. Little did I realize that I'd wrapped myself in a cocoon of self-preservation, to protect myself from being hurt again. I had earned a formidable reputation at work, as being a man of steel with a cold heart. It would seem that I would not let anyone into my soft personal space, for fear of being hurt again. One day a great friend of mine who was a firefighter called me up on the spot, encouraging me to go camping with him, in an area of wilderness in Northern California. "I haven't seen you for so long, Griffin, since we worked together 10 years ago. My, hasn't time flown by so fast, bro. We do need to reconnect. It's been far too long. I've rarely missed you." "It has been long," I agreed. "You won't have to go hiking on foot," he explained. "We'll go camping on horseback, so it's unlikely to be a problem for your leg. Go on, it'll do you good. Please say yes. I'm looking so forward to seeing you again." I didn't hesitate to say yes, as the very idea of camping in the wilderness was exceedingly appealing for me. It had been too long since my feet had padded the rich earthen trails of a verdant forest, and breathed in the fresh, crisp air of the mountains, or tasted the crisp, fresh water of a sparkling stream. The memories of those soulful experiences and others like them came flooding back to my mind, like a nostalgic fragrance I had not smelt for a very long time, like freshly mown grass, jasmine, or the smell of a pine forest. Stanley Finch was a man of few words, but when he spoke his mind, he wore his heart on his sleeve. "You've changed, bro," he said to me. "After your accident, something has died in you. That bright spark has all but faded." He informed me of this on the first night of our camping trip. We were relaxing by a fire pit outside of our tent, after having eaten some delicious barbecue ribs and pork tenderloin. "I've missed you, Griffin, but I can see life hasn't been good to you. You've become bitter, hard, cold. I know your ex-fiancé hurt you, as did the skiing accident, but there is no need to cover yourself in a protective bubble like this, or live in fear with such cynicism. That's not the Griffin I used to know. The old Griffin was fearless, passionate, enthusiastic, zealous. I'm not the man I once was," I admitted. "I'm a shadow of my former self. It doesn't help that I live in pain." Stanley looked at me in shock, his blue eyes registering concern. "I'm sorry, bro. I had no idea it was that bad. I hope your ride on Silver Birch this morning did not jolt you or exacerbate any old injuries. You must tell me if your leg is hurting." "Funny enough, the ride was pleasantly smooth," I assured him. "My leg pain is incongruous. I might be fine for a couple of days, and then suddenly, when I'm dictating a letter to my secretary, I'll be hit with these violent shooting spasms. I've learnt to live with the pain, manage it somehow." "That's terrible, bro. I'm sorry." He paused for a moment and said, "What about women? Are there any significant others in your life?" "Oh, that," I pooh-poohed, trying my level best to avoid such a direct, uncomfortable, confrontational question that I also didn't want to confront. "I've not had time to date. I'm too busy, I expect, involved in running my father's company. Business is good, very good." "But you're not, are you?" asked Stanley, looking at me fixedly. "It sounds to me as if running a successful company is a great source of distraction for you. so that you're far too busy to have a life beyond the office. You know what I think? I think you're scared to date." He said that looking at me sadly. "That bloody narcissistic ex-fiancé of yours obliterated all your confidence. I promise you, bro, take it from me, not all women are cast from the same mould. There are good ones out there. I promise, as hard as that is to believe. I'm not sure most women want to date a cripple." "Don't be ridiculous, Griffin. You've got a dodgy leg, for goodness sake. And even if you were crippled, why should that be a setback for you in finding a good woman? Do you remember Ralph Batterskew?" "I do. Very nice character." "Well, he ended up paralysed from the waist down from an injury when he was rescuing a young girl from a burning building. Moments after he saved her life, the scaffolding on the second floor collapsed. He sustained one heck of a nasty fall, poor man." "Oh, I am sorry to hear that," I said. "That does sound frightful." "Well, he got married last year. He has a wife and is very much in love. You could do the same, Griffin. Open your heart to a good woman. You don't want to be alone for the rest of your life, surely." "You make a good point, Stanley. I'll think about it," I said. "Please do, bro. You deserve to be very happy. But more to the point, I want you to be happy. I want to see the old spark return in your eyes. I do have an alternative motive for bringing you here, I have to confess," he said, grinning at me. "You do?" I asked, looking perturbed. I groaned. "Oh no, you haven't gone and set me up with an absurd date, have you? I hope you haven't." "Of course not. Let me explain. There was a wildfire not far from here, which took us days to extinguish. It was quite an inferno, a nightmare to control, let me tell you. One of the firefighters, Keith, claimed to have seen 2 Bigfoot running away from the location of the wildfire. I took it upon myself to examine the rural geography of the area. In my opinion, we're both camping in the heart of Bigfoot territory. I'm pretty certain the Bigfoots would have relocated to this spot, after the wildfire that is, given the topography of the area, the close access to fresh water and food sources." At Stanley's earnest expression, along with the excited glaze in his eyes, I couldn't stop myself from laughing. "You brought me here in the hope we might encounter a Bigfoot. Now that's borderline insane, bro." "That's exactly why I brought you here," said Stanley, grinning. "It's not just Keith that had a sighting of a Bigfoot. A few of the other dudes I work with had fleeting glances of the creature at various other wildfire locations. But never ever me. Can you believe it? Never me, the very one that wants a sighting more than anyone else. Well, it completely eludes me. I mean, how unfortunate do you have to get?" I grinned. "Maybe you're looking too hard," I teased. Stanley's expression was serious as his eyes meditated on the flames in the fire pit. "It's something I've always wanted," he said longingly. "An encounter with the hairy man himself. I'm not exactly sure why. I can't even fathom this enigmatic longing that I have." "But why?" I asked. "From what I gather, not all encounters are benevolent. You run the risk of encountering a belligerent territorial Bigfoot who could potentially be quite dangerous. Believe me, I've heard stories, scary stories, that I shall not repeat to you. That's a risk I'm willing to take. I'm of the opinion that these creatures are as individualistic as human beings. Look at the one in the picture taken at Bluff Creek all those long years ago. Anyone could see that that was not an aggressive critter. The poor thing, she couldn't get away fast enough. I almost felt sorry for her. She clearly wasn't thrilled to have been spotted. I can't say I blame her." "So you decided to bring along your friend with a gammy leg for a Bigfoot adventure, is that right?" I teased. "Why not? I certainly don't see you as a cripple. And even if I did, I'd still invite you. You've always been open to a good adventure. And Bigfoot, dude, it ain't going to get better than that. You do realise, Stanley, that Bigfoots are exceedingly elusive. Most sightings are so random, fleeting. I suspect that unless they're aggressive like an elephant in musk, looking for a fight or a confrontation with a human, you're very unlikely to see one. In my opinion, the vast majority of Bigfoots are just going to disappear into the ether." "Well, let's hope you're wrong about that," said Stanley, piling onto the open grill a whole pile of bacon rashers. I raised a questionable brow. "What are you doing, Stan? We've only just eaten. Shouldn't you be saving all that delicious, lovely bacon for breakfast tomorrow?" "I happen to have it on good authority that the smell of fried bacon is a drawing card for a Bigfoot, which is why I'm cooking it. It might help to get a Bigfoot to come to us, not the other way round. Bacon is the perfect bait." I smiled at my friend Riley. Stanley always had faith in the impossible. I certainly admired his ardent determination to encounter a Bigfoot, but I seriously doubted his efforts would be rewarded. I bit my lip, refraining myself from discouraging him, as that would be very cruel. But in truth I doubted his chances of success, for stumbling upon such an ambiguous, transient, fugacious creature, as elusive as the Scarlet Pimpernel, was exceedingly unlikely. We were camped in a northeastern part of California, bordering Oregon and Nevada, a secret location that was privy to a few rather spectacular, ancient, abandoned, and long since forgotten hiking and horse-riding trails that were barely ever used, or possibly even known about by the public. We had hitched up our tents around a silvery lake, on the edge of a flowery meadow, bordered by sagebrush, where two of Stanley's beloved black and bay horses, Silver Birch and Firecracker, were grazing away happily to their heart's content. In the long distance you could see the smouldering silhouettes of the undulating mountains that shimmered and gleamed under a cobalt-blue sky. The pyramid shapes of the ponderosa pines and Douglas firs clustered around the valley in a very grandiose electric green ensemble, rather like prominent celestial beings gathering together for an important meeting. The day had folded away so fast, like the pages of a book being swiftly turned. For the first time in ages I was resonating with the wilderness, breathing in her crisp fresh air, marvelling in the sensation of the fresh breeze blowing against my skin, transfixed by the magnificence of her beguiling allure. For so long the scenery of my office had all but depicted 4 plain walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking one of Los Angeles' busy, bustling streets, along with a cheap, tarty picture of a calendar girl in a bikini that someone had put on my wall as their idea of a joke, possibly to get some kind of a rise out of their stiff boss. But I had absolutely no intention of giving them the satisfaction, so I had wilfully ignored it, and now the buckling, bedraggled calendar had been on my wall for over 8 years. The valley was now bathed in a resplendent, velvety black sky, superbly offset by the twinkling jewels of the silvery stars, along with the bright luminescence of a dazzling full moon. The sounds of crickets, frogs, and the occasional howl of a coyote or wolf serenaded the night with their reassuring symphonies, while the fresh scent of butterscotch, pine, sage, intermingled with wild flowers, appeared so much more pronounced on this magical evening, now heightening their floral bouquet with delicious smoky smells that travelled on the breeze like a wispy feather, the quintessential pulling card for a Bigfoot, so we hoped. Before long our eyelids became droopy as our conversation waned, drifting away like 2 disembodied ghostly voices caught on the wind. We knew then that sleep was graciously inviting us to embrace the world of our dreams. We needed little encouragement, so we hit our sleeping bags hard, with the fervour of 2 drunken men soon drifting off into a deep sleep. I awoke with a start, sitting bolt upright, my body trembling. I'd heard a noise. I was certain there were large feet trudging around our campsite, of the bipedal kind, that is. I did not feel excitement of any kind, but a feeling of dread, as terrifying chills shot down my spine in a nervous frenzy, while sweat began to break out on my brow. My fingers and hands became clammy. I glanced over to Stanley, who was snoring very loudly, oblivious to what was going on. But if that wasn't weird enough, my friend's snores were being replicated by something or someone outside our tent, who was making the same snoring sounds as Stanley. Was there some loony outside our tent trying to make fun of Stanley's snores, I wondered. It was so hard to wake the man up, even after shaking him briskly for a while. He just groaned, rolled over, continued to sleep, and ignored me, so unresponsive to my desperate attempts to wake him up. "Bigfoot," I piped. "Bigfoot! Bigfoot! Bigfoot!" I knew those words would rouse him from his slumber, like a sleeping dog hearing the words, "Steak dinner, steak dinner, steak dinner." "Bigfoot," he said, sitting bolt up, bouncing out of his foggy state like an exuberant puppy dog. "Where? Where?" The excitement on his face was bubbling over like a pot of peas on the cooker. "I only said that to wake you up," I said. "There's something outside of our tent. It might be a weirdo. It's copying your snoring. Listen." "It was copying me snoring," said Stanley, growing even more exuberant. "It just might be a Bigfoot if that's the case. They mimic everything." The sound of heavy thumping footfall, accompanied by the snapping of crunching twigs and leaves, was very discernible. The ponderous, rather alarming footsteps around our campsite became so much more pronounced, and way too close for comfort. This haunting revelation did not bode well with me, knowing something monstrously huge was in our midst, something predatory, dangerous, frightening. The rising level of trepidation I felt had momentarily been expunged by a few sharp shooting pains in my leg that were taking off like fireworks, but were barely noticed by me. The footsteps suddenly stopped, as if the owner of the feet was standing very still. All of a sudden, the banging of the cast-iron grill from the fire pit could be heard, being crashed around like dirty dishes in a sink, washed by a pair of clumsy hands. Whoever was out there was meddling around with the fire pit, and they were not doing a good job in remaining discreet. "The bacon," I whispered. "Did you leave it on the grill?" "Of course I did," said Stanley. "I told you, didn't I? It's the perfect bait." All of a sudden we heard a thundering echo in the woods, moving towards our campsite, as feet bounded towards our tent. Every thunderous footstep of the approaching entity, whatever on earth it was, seemed to make the ground quiver, heave, shake, under what must have been a substantial, sizable weight, which led me to swiftly conclude that we did indeed have a couple of Bigfoots in our midst, as who else or what else could pound the ground with such a forceful power, other than an elephant or a rhino. Whatever this thing was, it was clearly bipedal. Stanley reached for his rifle, nodding to me. "I'm just going to take a peek outside," he said, giving me a thrilled, cheeky look, like a boy who'd caught the girl across the road in a compromising position. "I think we have 2 Bigfoots outside our tent," he whispered excitedly. "Are you stark raving mad, Stanley?" I protested. "You're going out there, leaving me in here, all on my own, to the mercy of the wolves? Are you kidding me?" Stanley did not listen. His focus was intense. He stealthily unzipped the door of the tent, cautiously creeping out of the opening, with me following close behind him. I had no intention of staying in my tent, like a banana in its skin, waiting to be pulled apart and devoured. I'd rather know what it was we were facing than hanker down low in the tent and just wait and see. Then we saw them. Nothing prepares you for seeing 2 incongruous creatures like this in our reality. Me and Stanley stood very still. We watched the scene unfolding before our very eyes, hardly daring to even draw breath, in case it should draw attention to us. It was like we were watching a movie. It was all so bizarre, so surreal. We could see 2 Bigfoots, one significantly smaller than the other. The smaller one, which I imagine was the former creature that had previously impersonated Stanley's snores, was sitting opposite our fire pit, with the cast-iron grill in his oversized hands. His pink tongue was licking the vertical iron ridges of the grill, rather like a popsicle. I assume he must have eaten all the bacon, and couldn't get enough of the delicious salty, smoky flavours. The larger Bigfoot, who was clearly female, based on her feminine heart-shaped face and low-slung breasts, had clearly only recently arrived on the scene. She was evidently trying her damnedest to evacuate her belligerent son from our camping location, which she regarded with the same level of angst and trepidation that I'd only been feeling moments before. She was possibly all too well aware that humans could carry rifles, could be reactive and threatening, not always to be trusted. It would seem that her youngling, who was not small by any manner of means, but clearly a juvenile, was impetuous, headstrong, and wilful. He had been surreptitiously lured away from his mother's charge by the delicious aroma of smoky bacon. I imagine he'd sneaked away on hot pursuit of the delicious smell. The mother wasn't at all happy with her son, who in her opinion, I imagine, she perceived was uncomfortably far too close to a human camping site for her liking. Her obstinate youngling was having none of it, as his tongue was almost superglued to that grill. I could feel every inch of the mother's level of annoyance as she studied her son with an expression of exasperation in her deep-set, treacle-coloured eyes. She was no different to any other weary mother, being bugged over and over again by her demanding child in a store, begging her to buy the candy bars, and being unrelenting in the process. In truth, I was rather surprised I didn't feel fear, but then again, how could I? In truth, the pertinent interaction between mother and son was so intrinsically human, so incredibly relatable, that I could actually perceive exactly what was going on, like an open book. The mother was about 6.5 foot tall, approximately 500 pounds, a very powerful sturdy build, muscular body, exceedingly long arms. I noticed her cone-shaped head flowed into a large pair of shoulders seamlessly, while her whole body was covered in dark brown, long flowing hair. Her son, on the other hand, was as tall as her, but long, lean and lanky, like a skinny teenager that has not filled out yet into his own body, but his energy was exceedingly juvenile. The mother was eyeing her son, with a grievous, despairing look of indignation and frustration on her face. She was trying desperately to pull him away from the grill with her overlong arms, but he firmly stood his ground, wilfully refusing to budge an inch. She was talking to him in a low tone, like a human whisper, obviously perceiving that 2 sleeping campers might be awoken if she was to raise her voice in any way. I'm glad to say she was obliviously unaware that she was being watched, as all her focus was completely on her son. Finally, the mother had reached the point of no return. Enough was enough. Her patience had worn thin. She grabbed the grill from the surprised youngling, who let out a little warning growl to his mother, like a small, snappy dog. The mother ran with our grill in her arms into the woods, the smaller Bigfoot running after her, screaming loudly. It was a clever ploy to get her child away from the campsite, I imagine. We watched in reverent awe as the 2 creatures glided away. Believe me, I have no explanation for this, but they looked like they floated, even though the ground heaved under their weight. For a moment, Stanley stood still, not saying a thing, staring at me, his eyes as wide as saucers. "Oh, my God," he said. We saw a Bigfoot." He looked like a boy who had been given a train set at Christmas and could not wipe the ecstatic grin off his face. "Correction," I said. "We saw 2 Bigfoot, a mother and her youngling, who was almost as big as her." "I can't believe it," said Stanley, clasping his hands over his mouth. "I can't bloody believe it. Did you see how beautiful they were? How intelligent? Oh, my God! I'm so happy, bro. So happy." I nodded. "They were beautiful," I said. "It's beyond me how anyone could kill a Bigfoot. They're so human." Needless to say, we discovered the following morning after we awoke from another sleep that the grill had surreptitiously been replaced and returned to our fire pit, almost as if nothing had happened, although the grill was completely clean. If we had not witnessed the absurd interaction between a mother and her youngling, we would have been none the wiser. It is without a shadow of a doubt in my mind that this event with a Bigfoot changed my life in more ways than you can ever imagine. It was like the locked, bolted door to my heart had been opened, as if the prisoner, that was me, hiding behind the closed door, had suddenly peered out from behind the wooden barricades for the very first time, rather like a butterfly emerging from a cocoon, embracing the world with a joyful new resolve, ever glad to have left the confines of its silken imprisonment. For so long my emotions had been frozen, as keeping the painful memories of my past in this solid, hardened state meant I could pretend that they weren't there, rather like the leg of lamb sitting at the bottom of the freezer that you clean forgot about. Slowly and surely the sun had risen over the horizon of my life, casting its golden shadows over my frozen inner world. The ice was beginning to melt away, while green shoots of recovery were budding, emerging like spring flowers bursting through the ground. Suddenly everything for me seemed brighter. I was happier now. more open to becoming the man I once was. It would seem that even my company employees no longer recognized the big boss, who was formerly cold, abrasive, unfriendly. But now I was different, very different. It was my secretary who'd been working for me tirelessly for over 5 long years that turned around to me and said, "Mr. Hughes, I don't know what's happened to you, but you went away for a weekend, and well, you've come back, and you're different. You're actually nice. Very nice. I always suspected that you were really rather nice, but you just didn't show it very well." I looked at my secretary for the first time in 5 years, the 5 years that she had worked for me. Before that, I'd barely acknowledged her, barked out orders, given her long to-do lists, but she was like a beautiful flower in the meadow that had been willfully ignored by me. But suddenly my eyes had been opened, as the walls of protection around my heart came crumbling down. I kid you not, within days, and I mean days, I'd asked my secretary to be my wife. I never looked back now. I'm such a happily married man, with 3 wonderful children, and I couldn't be happier. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. I do rather adore the Bigfoot licking all that lovely bacon fat off the grill. Oh, I can just imagine it. Until next time, goodbye and good night.